Hey, good evening. Hope everybody's having a good midweek here. Let's see how the stream looks. Dropped only 117 frames. That's not bad. That's about 4 seconds there. Anyway, we're just rerunning footage because it's still wet, but I think we'll be able to send the drone aloft tomorrow and see how things look. Okay, let's head into the charts here. Obviously, you can see I'm going to take a look at SPC here shortly, but let's look at the big picture. And this is the Synoptic scale chart. Let me throw the fronts on here. And we're using a tool called Digital Atmosphere. And for those of you who are new, this is a software program I wrote. Actually started work on this in Korea many years ago. And during my time off, I would code this in a version of Pascal, and it's just kind of grown over the years, and I'm actually looking forward to getting back in later tonight and doing some more work on it. The 3D stuff is kind of broken, and you know, I use this tool a lot, and I would like to be showing you 3D stuff here. So anyway, we've have a very, very persistent Hudson Bay vortex pattern. And just to show you an example, let's look at the historical data. So I'm going to go to NOAA Rescue Library, look at the daily weather maps. And that's probably not a good idea. If I start loading up graphics, that's going to crash things. So let me check my local drive and see if I've got some maps in here. I may be able to show you a Hudson Bay vortex pattern. Okay, well that's not going to turn out, but I can just show you tonight's pattern, and I'll just switch over to the GFS graphics. And yeah, that's really all you need to see there. You can see that it's kind of like a big spider web centered right there on Hudson Bay. And it's a very large pattern, goes all the way from Iceland across much of the eastern U.S. all the way back to almost the west coast. So this is all under the influence of a big Hudson Bay vortex, and I would think that that's been there probably about a month and a half or so, I would think. And typically upstream from the Hudson Bay vortex, we tend to get ridging along the west coast, and that tends to be dry for California. There's been a bit of a break in Washington, Oregon, and British Columbia, but California is doing very poorly for precipitation. Okay, let me take a look at the chat, make sure everybody's doing good. Good, no panicking. Audio looks good. We have fun with tech here. Ron Chalfant there in California says it feels like late spring. Got Electric Dog and Sue M. Adam Davis, 6 inches of snow up there today. David Moore, busy painting. We'll be listening. Burl H, 6 inches of snow on Monday, making up for a dry January. Okay, let's switch over back to the Synoptic scale chart. So what I'm trying to do is tie this into the surface pattern. Now, typically when we have a Hudson Bay vortex, we tend to see a little bit of cyclonic tendency out in the Hudson Bay region. Basically, we get occlusions ending up there, passing across Quebec, and moving northwest into the Coral Harbor and Rankin Inlet area. Further south and further west, we tend to see kind of an alternating pattern between high pressure and Alberta clippers. And we can kind of see an Alberta clipper coming together. Let me switch over here, make sure you guys can see this. There's the tail end of the polar front. So on this side, Saskatchewan, Alberta, Dakotas, we have cold air in place. That's pretty normal during a Hudson Bay vortex pattern. And further west, we tend to have warm air. So you kind of see the difference there. And in between, we have a fairly stagnant polar front that tends to be stuck in the mountains there. It's kind of shallow, a lot of dense air, and when you open the refrigerator door, you notice that little cloud along the floor. It tends to stay down really low, and that's what happens here. The cold air tends to stay along the mountains. Sometimes it'll get over the passes, but that keeps the front kind of stuck there in the high plains. However, further out west, in this area here, this is where we have a lot of unstable, very active Pacific air coming in from the west, or it can be from the Alaska area, and that'll work down the line like this and pick up the boundary, and next thing you know, we have a open wave, and that can progress into a mature system that comes into the Great Plains itself. And when we see that emerge on the lee side of the Rockies, that's an Alberta clipper there. So this whole area around British Columbia and Alberta, that's a development area for an Alberta clipper. Then further south in California, we tend to have very stagnant weather. And you can see this plateau high where we have very strong radiational cooling in the higher terrain of Nevada, Idaho, and Utah. And they tend to get very, very cold nights. The days can be either cold or they can be very warm. We're kind of in a warm phase here. This is sort of a semi-tropical air mass. And then over the southern U.S., we see a progression of cold fronts coming in from the northwest. So conditions tend to be on the cold side. So what we see tonight, as far as temperature anomaly, we are definitely very cold in the central U.S. Picking up a little tropical air on the east coast, but out west it is definitely warm. However, it does get pretty cool at night there in the deserts, and that's enough to get a bit of a high pressure area going in that region. All right, let's check out the charts. This is what we tend to see of the Hudson Bay vortex pattern down south. We tend to see the kind of a bite size piece of it, the Hudson Bay vortex way up north, and what we see here, kind of a northwesterly flow across the northern plains into the northeast U.S., but sometimes if we get troughing aloft over the west coast, we'll see a southern stream get going, and that's when we can tend to get winter weather in the Midwest and the South. Nothing like that right now, but the models have been hinting at something around the 13th or 14th. So we'll check that out in a bit. There's the thickness chart, and this shows you possible Alberta clipper getting ready to come together. So we should find that in this region maybe tomorrow. And then after that, we may see that coming southward. Alternatively, we can sometimes see that cross Canada, and I think that's the pattern we've sort of seen over the past week here, kind of a northerly track. Anyway, let's see, cold air over the Hudson Bay area, and the warmest air, you can see that's over California there. So conditions rather warm there. This is the thermal ridge, extends from the Gulf of California up the California coast. And on the periphery, conditions a little bit warm. Let's take a look at a couple soundings. Now that we have a very good picture what the air mass characteristics are like, Checking for drops here. 417 drop frames. That's about 15 seconds of lost video. It's not too bad. All right, so let's look at the soundings. If we go to Los Angeles, Vandenberg, Oakland, we expect to find warm conditions and possibly a lot of ridging aloft, a lot of warm air aloft. And yeah, indeed, that's the case there. San Diego, a little bit of north wind telling us that we're on the eastern periphery of that system, and a lot of dry air. So conditions, VFR for pilots, and very good visibility and probably no airline delays there. And very high tropopause, can't forget that. Check out Vandenberg, which is a little further up the coast past Santa Barbara. Still about 150 miles south of San Francisco there. Showing a bit of a marine layer here. You see that right there. Mid-levels very warm, coming up close to 70 degrees at about 3,000 feet. But below that we pick up a lot of cool air, and that's that Pacific layer. A little bit of easterly flow or westerly flow showing up. And surface temperatures running right around 59 Fahrenheit, and you can see the humidity there because the two lines are coming very close together. And we might as well go up to Oakland and see how they're looking tonight. Very similar, almost the same as San Diego there. So a lot of warm and dry air. So let's take a look at the opposite. We'll go up to Hudson Bay. We've got a few stations up there. We've got Baker Lake. We've got Churchill. We've got some Inuit, I don't know. Oh, Inuktitut, okay. And Frobisher Bay, which is now Iqaluit, okay. So a few stations there. Let me try Baker Lake and give that a go here. Wow, we are way over to the left. A little further and we'd be off the chart there. In fact, if we go way down low, we've got a little Arctic air mass. There is an actual difference, believe it or not, between Arctic and polar air. It's kind of splitting hairs there. I don't see a whole lot of books that talk about it, but in general, a very cold air mass, we tend to refer to that as polar air. So you'll see the designations in older books, CP for continental polar, which is what this is. However, the lower layers where we have even more development of a shallow, extremely frigid layer, we'll go with an Arctic air mass designation for that. And typically what we can tend to see sometimes, especially if we have pollutants near the ground, that happens a lot in Fairbanks, we'll have this layer naturally very humid, kind of clouds up, and the very tops of that form a little bit of a stratus or fog layer, and that radiates out during the night into space. It radiates away long wave radiation. So that creates some cold air. The cold air sinks down to the ground. So the whole thing just develops further and further and gets progressively colder and colder. So you can end up with this strengthening over a period of many days and going further and further off to the left, and generally an incoming system will mix the whole column up and get rid of that. So most of what we're seeing here is polar air, but a little bit of evidence there of Arctic air near the ground. Although it looks like it's not quite decoupled there, about 10 knots down near the surface. We'll try Hall Beach. I think that's Hall Beach. Yeah. Yep, another Arctic layer, about 1,500, 2,000 feet. Very low tropopause. And we'll continue the trend and go up to Resolute. And we should see similar characteristics there. Polar air mass and then kind of a mild Arctic layer. That could be a secondary polar air mass there. Maybe two of them, maybe something like that. I think that might be a little subsidence inversion right there. So that's kind of how we read the soundings. And let's return down to the lower 48. And we'll just grab Lincoln, Illinois. Got a little bit of cloud layer. This is probably cirrus and cirrostratus, probably an overcast layer. Tropopause right above that. And then down below that we've got quite a bit of dry mid-level air. Looks like this is actually a very fairly warm air mass, kind of mild. You can see we extend that down and we get about 59 degrees. A bit below that, maybe below here, maybe below here. This is all modified polar air. Okay, so that's our tour of the SKUTs, and I'll leave it there before people start going off to watch PewDiePie videos. All right, so here's the frontal analysis. Looks like we've got a secondary push of not Arctic, but cold air coming south along the Appalachians down to the Gulf Coast. And then along the tail end, looks like that front extends right up through Denver and then on up towards Montana there. So this is all our continental polar air. Looks like ahead of it we've got a little bit of maritime tropical air, probably very heavily modified. And then this here, probably a mix of continental tropical and maritime tropical. I still like those old air mass designations. I think they're still useful. They've kind of been forgotten over the years, but I still use them here. Let's check out the SPC analysis, and we'll see what they're going with. If we want to pull up that theta analysis, I'll go to the velocity tensor, and there we can see the front. Looks like even a little bit of a warm advection wing right there around Charlotte. Then on the back side, there's our polar front extending all the way up to Alberta there. And looks like maybe another little push of cold air coming through Indianapolis and Mattoon and just north of St. Louis, maybe up to Bethany. So that might be a little thing you can watch there if you're down around since Dayton, Paducah. You might be looking for maybe a little bit of colder air coming in tonight. So yeah, a lot of things to see when you pull up these different products. Okay, well, we're getting into storm season, so we're going to start looking at more of these SPC charts. I think that makes a really good topic. We're going to look at instability, this menu right here. We can look at how unstable the air mass is. Did that take? I don't think it... Oh yeah, there it is. It's way off. There we go. Yeah, little instability down around Florida. Surprisingly, about 1,500 Cape down in there in the Gulf Coast. Yeah, so no wonder we're getting a few showers there. And the shaded areas, that's going to correspond to convective inhibition. Now, this comes from numerical models, and they have a lot of trouble accurately depicting the convective inhibition. So I don't really look at those fields too much. I do look at the Cape, but for convective inhibition, I like to go to the soundings and work that out. Okay, we'll go ahead and move things along. Let's do a mesoscale tour here. I don't think we have any fronts there in the western U.S., but there's Washington and Montana. So we see the front way off to the right side there. That's close to around Kalispell and Great Falls. And we can see that cold air erodes. Looks like a kind of a sloshing back and forth, pushing into Glacier National Park there, but not much going on there in Washington and Oregon, just a little bit of westerly flow, and that's going to be kind of a warm westerly flow. Temperatures up to 63 there at Bend. And wow, another little Arctic or I'm going to call that polar for now. Another little polar influx on Friday, Thursday night and Friday, and it looks like this is coming in through a few of the passes there in Montana. See how aggressive that cold air moves in. So it's got a little bit of depth there and makes it all the way to about Yellowstone Park, and then looks like it gives up about then. So yeah, we're going to feel that down south, so probably some more cooler weather coming down into the Central Plains. Okay, for the Central Plains, starting out, this is earlier today. We warm up and we see high pressure over the Central Great Plains there. So, southerly flow on the high plain side, and that's going to erode out some of the cold air. Yeah, there it goes. And then nighttime, this is tonight. Looks pretty slow overnight, and then tomorrow we warm up and we see the yellows and greens come in, and it looks like the next change coming up there in Montana. That's going to be the next front. So yeah, starting tomorrow, and we're going to see that front racing down into Wyoming and reaching Denver during the morning rush on Friday, and the rest of it coming into the I-70 corridor in Kansas and all the way back to Yellowstone Park. And let's see that. Yeah, that's coming into Wichita during the early afternoon on Friday, and then almost all the way to Oklahoma City by Friday evening. Let's check out the impacts for the southern plains. There's what we started out with today. We can see northerly flow pretty much everywhere except the high plains right back in here. So all of this is under ridging. That ridge is going to be over most of Texas overnight, so another cold night. And then it looks like tomorrow we start developing, yeah, see, really cold there. 32 is coming all the way down to San Antonio. But then I think we're going to see a rapid warm-up. See here, southwesterly flow. And yeah, there we go. Oranges and Amarillo. And then the next night, just southerly flow. Not much flow off the Gulf there. Looks like it's all recirculated. So not really any stratus coming up into Texas tomorrow night. And then for Friday, that's going to be the big change. See that front coming in from the north, blue norther coming all the way through Kansas during the day. And we can see a little bit of a cyclone developing there around Amarillo. Let me draw out the fronts for you. So there we go. That's going to be the cold front on its way south. And I put this little warm front area because there's a cyclone right around this area where it changes over. So that's going to be right around Shamrock. And that can be significant on storm days when we have a cold front in the area. That can help augment the influx of moist air into western Oklahoma on a day like this, and also bring the dry line further east. So we definitely got some dry air moving off the Cap Rock. And maybe we will see a weak dry line on Friday there. But I don't think we've had enough moisture return to get storms going. I'm kind of skeptical of that. Okay. Might see storms later on Friday night, certainly. And we'll check out the southeast U.S. here. Yeah, here's our current front coming into Georgia and Alabama. This is the current chart right here, and that'll just move on into Florida overnight. And looks like winds pick up Thursday afternoon in central Florida, and the front makes it all the way into Miami during the evening. And I'm seeing a 75 for Friday down in the Miami area, and just kind of a ridge over Georgia, keeping it kind of cold in that area, but the Gulf is open on Friday further west. Okay, so that's the tour there of the patterns. Let me give you the satellite view. Looks like we're doing better with cold air. Instead of having those yellows everywhere, we've just got kind of greens and yellows. But definitely northwesterly flow over the northern plains. Okay, let's see here. Ryan Toomey is reporting a warm-up in South Florida, low 80s and windy. Cold front pushing through later tomorrow. We got Carl Berghoff and, let's see, Andrew Hotchkiss asking about the 2018 storm season. I haven't really looked that far ahead, so I'm not too sure. That's a good question. I'll take a look at that, but it seems like every time I've looked at the spring outlook earlier, it's been like hot and below normal precipitation, which indicates, you know, a strong tendency for ridging and difficulties with the moisture. So we may be looking at something like that, but there's really no way to tell. I might be able to look at the PNA and NAO pattern this week and see if there's any clues there. Fun with Tech reporting a Go 16 site. I'm going to have to add that to my bookmarks. Carl Berghoff saying we need to get rid of the Arctic air that's so entrenched. Yeah, it's definitely needed. Ryan Toomey's reporting ChaserCon coming up next week in Denver. And Fun with Tech asking if anybody other than him is going. I'm going to try to make that myself. Probably try to set up my table there. Ryan Toomey saying Stormview Live will carry the broadcast, and Cthulhu saying I'm going to be there. Adam Davis, never be bored enough to watch PewDiePie videos. Veraz TV, hello. Sue M saying colder air coming. Ryan says it's a little muggy there. Feeling it at 1500 to 2000. 1500 to 2000. I'm not sure what the units are. Oh, maybe feet? I'm lost, I'm sorry. Justin Pulliam says lagging out pretty much completely there earlier. Electric Dog reporting buff. Andrew Hotchkiss, so much cold air. And Sue M saying thanks for the explanation about the Arctic versus polar air. Very interesting. Okay. Yeah, we tend to not see a whole lot of actual Arctic air down south because usually it's lost the characteristics that produce it. Obviously, we don't see a whole lot of ice fog down in St. Louis, and we don't see a whole lot of, you know, very, very cold air mass settling down. Sometimes it can happen during cold situations like 89, and that's how we about this. We went closed off as much as the GFS there, closer to the European solution. So once again, I think maybe the Canadians are doing pretty well here. It does close off in Arizona around the 15th, and Pacific is open after that time. Okay, so a little bit more agreement with the models compared to what we had last night. The next one, this is going to be associated with that upper level disturbance. So Gulf Coast system around the 16th, around the other side of that high, and then pretty quiet. Looks like an Alberta Clipper coming south around the 16th, and Plateau High building into the west. Okay, and let's look at the